Peace, everyone. Hope everyone's having a good Friday. It is, of course, the holy day for Muslims all across the world. Today, we're going to jump right into it. I'm trying to keep these videos short and full of information. So, we're going to jump right into it. Let me make sure my volume is all the way up so y'all can hear.
4 African countries have had coups that have seen the ousting of their leaders. Leaders they claim are puppets placed by France so they can do whatever they want with the country and their resources.
One may think they're wrong, but the fact that this got France angry and threatens to retaliate sends a message of what is really happening. France has threatened to wage an attack on Niger, who just had a military coup, and says the military leaders are a threat to their interest. They just displaced over 1,000 French troops from Mali to the capital city of Niger. But why is France so worried? What interest are they protecting? Well, if you haven't been current, let me bring you up to speed. Niger military leaders just placed a ban on the export of uranium and gold, especially to France. Uranium is a major mineral needed by France in its nuclear power plants. Uranium from Niger powers over 1/3 of homes in France, yet over 85% of Niger doesn't know what electricity is. Isn't that unfair? I mean, it is only fair if France helped in developing places and make them enjoy even a piece of their uranium. As a matter of fact, it is not just France. 25% of uranium entering the European Union comes from Niger. It is only logical that one day people will come to the realization that they are being cheated. And they just did. But France has decided they won't let it slide. France says it will do everything to protect its interest in Niger. It will be important to note that the USA also has a military base in Niger, and also you can remember it is a NATO member too. And you know, whenever any NATO country is at war, other NATO member countries come to help. This is exactly what is about to happen. The military leaders of Niger's neighboring countries notice the pattern and decide to back Niger. Who are these leaders and what pattern have they noticed, and why do they back Niger? Well, if you've not been informed, Mali and Burkina Faso have also had coups and their countries taken over by the military leaders too. Mali is led by Assimi Goïta, while Burkina Faso is led by Ibrahim Traoré. These two are strongly in favor of France leaving all of French Africa. They also warned that any attack on Niger means an attack on Mali and Burkina Faso too. They warned France and the US that they won't hesitate to send in troops to back Niger. Other ECOWAS member states condemn this act too, especially as the president of Niger is held hostage and they demand that he be freed. They also gave Niger a 7-day ultimatum to let him go. As a matter of fact, Nigeria has closed its borders and stopped all trade with Niger. The economy between Nigeria and Niger has slowed as a result of this, and the people of Niger suffer already as the country's economy heavily depended on Nigeria. The concern of Mali and Burkina Faso is that they see this as the same thing that happened to Libya. The fight starts with one NATO member, and at the end of the day, the country is at war with many NATO members. Can you see the similarity? Libya is in bad shape today because of its richness in oil. Congo is in constant conflict because it is so rich in natural resources and only one person is benefiting from this. France. Today, Niger bans the export of its natural resource and tit becomes a threat to France's interest. What do you think about this? Do you think Niger should continue trading with France for peace to reign? Do you think Burkina Faso and Mali should send in troops to defend Niger? As for us, we love to see a world where every country uses its resources to make its people happy and rich while sharing a bit of God's blessings to the world with other countries. Niger is the second poorest country in the world, and this isn't fair. They have what it takes to make them rich and comfortable. It is only fair if they got a share of that. 4 African
Many more have been aware of this on social media, as well as the statements made in favor of Putin in South Africa, and how Putin, who is the leader of Russia, has forgiven, millions of dollars worth of debt to different African countries, and how basically NATO and the United States is upset with BRICS, which BRICS is essentially NATO but not NATO. And for those of you who don't know, NATO stands for North Atlantic Trade Organization, and it's basically a military pact with other countries in the name of trade. And that's why the person in this video is speaking about NATO and how, in response to what's happening in Niger, or however you want to say it, that the people's uprising against colonial powers is a threat to these NATO countries, because their agreements are with trade, but they're trading these people's natural resources and giving them nothing in return. And they're ensuring that the regimes that are in charge are regimes that are favorable to the colonists. So the people of the land, which in some reportings of what's happening regarding this alleged coup, they were referred to them as terrorists. But what's interesting, and I think worthy of note, that all Moors should be aware of this, is that within the United Nations, they agreed that they were going to respect the sovereignty of every other state, and that one state would not meddle in the internal affairs of another state. Obviously, in that language, the words state and nation are interchangeable. So these nationals who are rebelling against the corrupt politicians of their government have every absolute sovereign right to do that according to the principles of the United Nations in their charter, in their very charter. And the fact that other countries are getting involved to suppress this people's movement is extremely against everything the member states of the UN claim to stand for. Now, obviously, if you're more and you've been studying, you understand that this is nothing more than neo-colonialism. Neo meaning new, a new form of colonialism, whereas the colonists, under the guise of a mandate, will claim that they're interested in helping the people, in rightful government, when in actuality they normally enter into unilateral agreements with these people, saying that they don't have the right to mine and access their own natural resources under their own country, and that a lot of times the European countries will say that they have the right to manage the international affairs of that country. Now, I haven't read on any agreements between France and Niger, but that is a norm. And for anyone that's listening, you can look that up yourself and see that it is in fact and indeed neocolonialism, where, it's basically like, if for the Moors, I've seen the propaganda here in North America regarding the slave narrative, how there's always a quote house Negro unquote, whereas the house Negro will receive some type of benefit. They get to be in the big house and get the real food and sleep on a real bed and get the real blanket. That's essentially what they're doing with these puppet politicians, who they ensure that those who are favorable to the European Union and the European Empire, which includes the United States, are the ones in power. And when the people revolt, like right here, they call them terrorists, and as opposed to the people trying to liberate themselves. And you'll see that has been a common theme for the past few decades. That when the natural people, Aboriginal and Indigenous people of the land, decide to say, hey, we are nationals and we have the right to be seen as nationals, and we have the right to govern ourselves. We don't want any external countries or forces determining what happens on our land. We need to fight back because they're ruling us with the iron hand of oppression, and they're ruling us with military might, and they're ruling us with military force, and their courts are corrupt, and their politicians are corrupt. We need to liberate ourselves from this. When they take that position, they often get labeled as extremist or terrorist and things of that nature. But I'm doing this video to hopefully inform Moorish Americans about these tactics that the international community uses, specifically the European Union. And when I say the European Union, I include the United States and the NATO countries, which includes African countries, but the leaders are sympathetic to Europe and their colonial powers. So be aware of that, and be aware that these people have nationalized themselves, and they're doing more than just petitioning the government with paperwork because the government is corrupt. So when you're fighting against a hostile party or trying to resist against a hostile party, and words aren't enough, and the right thing isn't enough, this is often the result of what happens when corrupt people are doing corrupt things. It doesn't make sense how this is, I think, the seventh largest export of, I think it was uranium or something like that. And the people are poor. The people themselves are poor, not the house Negroes that are sympathetic to the Europeans and assimilate into their way of thinking and their way of dress and their culture and their mindset. Those people are rich. They're fine. They're living comfortably. But the everyday individual, the everyday national that's working a 9 to 5 or trying to feed their family, they're struggling. They're suffering. And whenever that happens, you'll see that those people are often the ones to demand change. And I'll keep this video that short.